Because I had two brothers, they were twins. So I was really more or less like an only child. And they were very, very bright, my
Due to the fact that I had two brothers. They were identical twins. They were extremely intelligent, but I was essentially an only child. My brothers, I guess people want you to remember the movies when you become my age. They will inquire about Downtown Abbey, Harry Potter, and the Oscars. They will inquire about what it was like to work with well-known figures or stand on those magnificent stages. And while I don't dislike those queries, they are no longer the first thoughts that cross my mind. The ironic thing about growing older is that the work gradually fades into the background. Of course, it still exists. I'm pleased with it. I put everything I had into it. However, I don't think about premieres when I'm sitting peacefully with a cup of tea. I think about people, usually faces, like someone laughing in between takes, someone knocking on my dressing room door to ask if I wanted a cookie, or someone telling a terrible joke that strangely got funnier every year. These are the things that endure. I've been fortunate. You come across amazing people in this industry. Some people are just as intelligent as everyone thinks they are. Others, who never made a fuss about it, are considerably more kind than anyone ever realized. Success was always featured in the newspapers. It's unfortunate that they didn't write much about friendship, because it helped a lot of us get through tough times. Extended rehearsals, non-stop travel, and times when you questioned whether you would ever land a good role again. I've worked with certain folks for years, while I've just sometimes seen others. Strangely enough, time was never important. Some people have such an impact on your life that years after they've passed away, you still anticipate hearing their voice. That's what I still do. Occasionally, I'll hear a sentence, read a specific way, or enter an old stage, and for a brief moment, I believe they're going to turn the corner and smile. The memory always comes before reality, of course, but they never do. And maybe that's why I wanted to tell you about these 5 people. They're still here with me, even after everything else has vanished. Richard is the first person that springs to mind. The voice is remembered by most individuals. Even before you saw Richard Harris, you could hear him. The way he spoke had an unmistakable quality. Mischievous one moment, confident the next. In some way, even when he was narrating a commonplace tale, it seemed worthy of an audience. He didn't have to work hard to make people laugh. One of my favorite things about him was that, over the years, we collaborated at various times, and each time I saw him, it was like no time had passed. Some performers bring the burden of their reputation with them when they arrive on set. That never appeared to pique Richard's interest. He was much more concerned with whether or not everyone was having fun. Remember, they frequently had to listen to one of his unbelievable tales in order to have fun. Most likely, half of them were accurate. By the time he was done, nobody noticed which was which. So the other half improved because they weren't. I recall sitting in between scenes as Richard, without even realizing it, went from chair to chair, gathering small crowds. 20 minutes after someone asked him a straightforward question, everyone in the room forgot that filming was scheduled to resume. He was gifted in that way. When the cameras weren't rolling, he was surprisingly gentle. He would notice if someone was anxious. Richard always managed to make a young actor who was nervous about a scene laugh before giving some guidance. He never sounded like a teacher. It was just a talk. I've always appreciated actors that want everyone to be aware of their talent. Richard didn't have to. As soon as he stood in front of the camera, you could see it. He never seemed to compete with anyone. Maybe because of this. He was already aware of his identity. When I found out he was gone, my thoughts shifted from the amazing performances to the everyday afternoons, the chats, the laughter that reverberated down a studio hallway, and the sense that work somehow made easier when Richard was around. I still miss those things. Richard, not the legend that everyone else recalls. Judy is one of those persons I've never truly considered a colleague. Given how frequently our names have been used together over the years, That may sound a little odd, but she has always seemed much closer to me than that. You stop considering careers after you've known someone for decades. You just know them. It's a common misconception that Judy and I were constantly discussing acting. If anything, we didn't discuss the topics that everyone else discusses. The weather, family, gardening, someone getting terribly lost on the way to the theater. And, since we're British, it seems to be mandated by law. When necessary, the acting took place. The remainder of the period, the friendship took place. Something about Judy that viewers don't always get to see has always impressed me. She listens, I guess. It seems like such a commonplace thing, doesn't it? However, it isn't. Many people are waiting for their opportunity to speak in our line of work. Judy genuinely pays attention to what you have to say, and somehow gives you the impression that your words are worthwhile. It's an uncommon gift. After rehearsing the same scenarios for hours on end, I recall how exhausted everyone was. On days like that, tempers tend to shorten. However, Judy had a remarkable ability to alter the atmosphere without putting on a show. It was merely a silent jest at times. Occasionally, she would pull the cutest little face across the room until someone saw it and burst out laughing. The tension vanished in a matter of minutes, just Judy being Judy. No drama, no speeches. People enjoy comparing us to see who performed better, funnier, or more powerfully. None of that ever made sense to me. Asking someone to pick between two old friends, just because they worked at the same place, always felt like that. That's not how I've ever viewed it. The only thing I've ever been thankful for is that our paths happen to cross. Even when you're surrounded by people, working in this field may be unexpectedly lonely. It's a blessing to have someone who doesn't require an explanation to grasp the peculiar rhythm of it all. For me, Judy has always been that kind of person. You've done incredibly well if you're lucky enough to have even one friend like that in your lifetime. I am certain that I have. The loudest person in the room was never Alan. In fact, his stillness could have been misconstrued for distance if you didn't know him. It wasn't just Alan. He was deliberate in his word choice. He didn't feel compelled to speak in every quiet moment. And that's kind of nice. Those who remain silent, unless they truly have something to say, are reassuring. Most folks were drawn to that amazing voice right away. There was no way not to. His eyes caught the attention of the others. Every time, they gave him away. Even if he was trying to keep his expression as straight as possible, there was always a trace of amusement in those eyes. For years, they crossed paths while working together on the Harry Potter movies. They weren't big events. The majority of the days were surprisingly typical. While the crew worked through one technological issue after another, we would be lounging around in costume and chatting while we waited for lighting adjustments. Movies are not as glamorous as people think. The waiting didn't seem to upset Alan. He would come over and ask how you were doing. And soon, we would be discussing everything but the movie we were doing. Literature, the theater, or someone we had both recently seen. We would occasionally sit there for 10 minutes without saying anything at all. And for some reason, it never felt uncomfortable. Few people are able to create a welcoming atmosphere in quiet. Alan was able to. He also had a very dry sense of humor. It wasn't the kind that made an announcement. Everyone would start laughing together a few seconds after it arrived so softly that half the room missed it. Alan was already acting as though he hadn't said anything intelligent by that point. That always struck me as incredibly charming. It didn't seem possible when word spread that he was gone. Some people have a sense of permanence. You persuade yourself that they'll constantly be in the vicinity, getting ready for another rehearsal or entering a different set with that comforting, familiar look. Every now and then, I still catch myself thinking that, and I'm thankful not because I worked with Alan Rickman, but rather because I knew Alan. Those are two very different things. Now, to put it mildly, Michael was quite unachievable. It was impossible to predict what he would say next. Everyone was kept up at night by his marvelously unpredictable streak. After a long day, when everyone was starting to get tired and the studio had become a little quiet, Michael would arrive out of nowhere with some absurd comment that made everyone laugh all over again. Being regarded like a great actor never seemed to appeal to him. He would typically find a way to change the topic or make a joke at his own expense if someone began complimenting him excessively. He didn't exhibit any vanity, which is rather uncommon in our line of work. That greatly impressed me. It's a common misconception that craving attention is the source of confidence. The reverse was demonstrated by Michael. He didn't want to impress anyone, so he entered a set with total confidence. He just had faith in himself, and everyone around him felt the same way. Audiences welcomed him in his own way when he took on the character of Dumbledore. He never attempted to mimic previous actors who had portrayed the role. It required bravery. Copying what people already loved would have been much simpler. However, Michael had no interest.